Unlocking the sacred mystery. Why did God give us the Sabbath? Jesus transforming revelation. In the 3rd year of Jehoiakim, a sunlit Sabbath day enveloped Galilee, where fields of golden grain swayed gently in the breeze, filled with the fragrant promise of harvest. Jesus walked alongside his disciples, their laughter mingling with the songs of larks soaring above. In this radiant moment of camaraderie, the disciples felt both joy and a hint of anxiety, for they were aware of the traditions upheld by the Pharisees, guardians of the law, who eyed them from a distance. Among the dust clouds that loomed on the horizon, the Pharisees approached, their robes whispering disapproval as they scrutinized the gathering. "Look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" they demanded, voices sharp as scythes that cut through the early grain. The tension stirred within the disciples, their eyes wide with confusion as they glanced at Jesus, who was gently plucking ears of grain, an act resonating with an inviting defiance. "Have you never read what David did when he was in need and hungry, he and those with him?" Jesus inquired, drawing them into the deep well of their history. The story of David sharing the sacred bread, reserved for priests alone, hung in the air. The disciples listened, captivated, as their teacher wove this ancient narrative into the fabric of the day. With each story, the atmosphere around them teemed with revelation and wonder, an echo of God's heart for humanity. The Pharisees tightened their grip on authority, faces stiff in law-bound disapproval. Yet Jesus' voice cut through their objections like the noon sun penetrating morning mist. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Every word he spoke pressed against their rigid interpretations, revealing a divine rhythm just beneath the surface. This day was not merely a set of restrictions, it was a precious gift from God, a sacred pause for restoration and reflection. As murmurs rippled among the crowd, uncertainty flickered in the air. Was the Sabbath a day of restriction or liberation? Jesus stood resolute, his compassionate gaze igniting a spark of understanding in the hearts of those present. He embodied the essence of rest and restoration, revealing God's desire. Not hollow adherence to the law, but hearts surrendered to the rhythm of grace and mercy. Before we continue with this incredible biblical account, I want to make sure you don't miss any of these powerful scripture stories. Click the bell icon and select all notifications. These biblical narratives have transformed countless lives throughout history. If God's word through this story is blessing you, please like and share with someone who needs to hear about God's faithfulness today. Tell me in the comments, which biblical story has most impacted your faith journey? I'm always amazed how God's word speaks to hearts across generations. Now let's continue with what the Lord did next. Around them, the golden grains whispered in the wind, each year a reminder of the bounty waiting to be harvested and the hope that God provides. With every question and answer exchanged, the sacred dance of law versus love unfolded, creating palpable anticipation. The Pharisees clung to their authority, unable to see that the one before them was indeed the Lord of the Sabbath. The tension hung heavy. Would the people seek the heart of God, or remain entangled in the chains of tradition? As shadows stretched over the landscape, the mystery of God's plan lingered, leaving hearts yearning for the profound revelation yet to unfold. The true liberation found in the rest that Jesus offers, still awaiting discovery. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the fields, Jesus looked up, sensing the weight of the Pharisees' scrutiny and the growing unease among the people. He turned to the disciples, his eyes filled with both compassion and purpose. "Come," he beckoned gently. "Let us go into the synagogue." With a quiet resolve, they followed him, the air thick with expectation and uncertainty. As they entered the synagogue, the smell of incense mingled with the murmurs of worshippers gathered in reverent discourse over the sacred scriptures. Jesus could see the familiar faces, both filled with hope and bound by fear of the law. The stony glares of the Pharisees followed him as he approached the front. Then an elderly man with a withered hand, who had often sought refuge in the shadows of the synagogue, pushed through the crowd. His eyes shone with a glimmer of hope but held the weight of despair. He made his way to Jesus, trembling but steadfast in his longing for healing. The Pharisees, ever vigilant, saw the man's plight and their hearts hardened. "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" they asked, their challenge laced with venom, seeking to entrap him in their legalistic snare. Jesus, who knew their thoughts, stood between the man and his adversaries, the air growing thick with tension. "What man among you, if he has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not take hold of it and lift it out? A man is worth far more than a sheep," he replied, his voice steady, resonating with authority that surpassed their hardened hearts. He turned to the man with the withered hand. "Stretch out your hand." For a moment, time slowed. The crowd held its breath and the Pharisees watched, hearts pounding in apprehension. With faith ignited by Jesus' command, the man stretched forth his hand, and behold, it was restored, whole like the other. A gasp rippled through the assembly, followed by a chorus of astonished praise that filled the synagogue, lifting the spirits of the oppressed. Yet the Pharisees' fury flared, blinded by their envy. They conspired among themselves, looking to snuff out this burgeoning light. Their hardened hearts recoiled at the fulfillment of the prophecy, that the eyes of the blind would be opened and the hands of the lame strengthened. "Why do you do this?" they spat defiantly at Jesus. He looked upon them with sorrow mingled with indignation. "If you were truly the shepherds of Israel, you would embrace the sheep, not shun them. The Sabbath is a day of healing, a day of mercy." Through his piercing words, he beckoned them to the essence of the law, the heart of God embodied in love and restoration. But their hearts were sealed, refusing to yield to the truth standing before them. As Jesus withdrew from the synagogue, a whisper of twilight accompanied his step, and the disciples followed, their minds a whirlpool of miracles and revelations. Hope bloomed anew in every spirit touched, yet rootless fear lingered in those who clung to the shadows of tradition. As dusk spread its mantle over the land, Jesus turned to his disciples, an enigmatic smile gracing his lips. "There is yet a greater work I must perform, a rest that surpasses understanding, for the Father's plan unfolds even now." With this, the mystery deepened, hearts quickening as they sensed the shifting tide of greatness that was to come. The night was preparing to unveil more than they could fathom, as the promise of the kingdom began to echo through the valleys of the world, drawing nearer with each breath, leaving them yearning for revelation still hidden in the depths of God's sovereign design. As they walked in silence, the echoes of praise still lingered in the air, mingling with the deepening shadows of the evening. The disciples exchanged glances, their hearts alight with wonder, yet burdened by the weight of their master's words. What greater work could he possibly mean? What rest could transcend understanding? Suddenly Jesus halted along the path, the fading light illuminating his features. "I tell you truly," he began, his voice low yet resonant, "the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And therefore, the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath." His declaration sent reverberations through the hearts of his followers, challenging the very foundations of their traditions. They pressed closer, each one yearning for clarity. "Master," Peter ventured, his brow furrowed with concern, "if the law teaches us rest, how shall we find it in you when the world seeks to bind us?" Jesus looked at Peter, a spark of understanding igniting in his gaze. "It is in me that the law finds its fulfillment. The rest you seek is not merely the cessation of labor, but the restoration of the soul. The heart of the Sabbath awaits those who acknowledge the source of all life." As the moon ascended, casting silver rays that danced on the ground, Jesus continued, recounting the history of Israel. "Even in the wilderness, do you remember how the Lord provided manna? Each morning the people gathered just enough for their needs. This was a gift from heaven, a reminder to trust and abide." They nodded, recalling the sacred stories woven into their heritage, the trials and triumphs of their ancestors. Yet, even amidst their liberation, they clung to the chains of ritual instead of the heart of God. Jesus observed with a somber testament, "The Sabbath should cradle the weary and restore the broken, but it became a weapon wielded by the self-righteous." A sigh passed through the group, their spirits heavy with the gravity of his words. They could sense the impending storm shaping around their teacher, as the scales tipped ever closer toward conflict with those in power. "Fear not," Jesus reassured his disciples, "for in the coming days, I will reveal the fullness of the Father's love, a love that stretches beyond human understanding, a love that calls sinners to repentance and the weary to rest. As they continued, their hearts swelled with hope, yet worry also gnawed at their insides. Would their loyalty lead them into danger? Just then, from the edge of the crowd, a woman shouted out, "Rabbi, what must I do to be saved?" Her voice pierced the uncertainty hanging in the air, compelling Jesus to pause. He turned, his eyes softening as he met hers. "Do you believe in the power of God to save? For it is written, 'The Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and saves the crushed in spirit.'" Psalm 34:18. "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." The crowd stood in awe, the truth of his words settling deep within their hearts. The murmurs ceased, and in that sacred moment, they understood. The Sabbath embodied divine rest, yes, but more so, it pointed to the one who is the rest giver. As darkness enveloped them, the tension in their hearts transformed into a fervent anticipation of what lay ahead, knowing they were part of a far greater unfolding plan, a divine revelation whispering promises of hope that would shatter chains and restore the lost. Prepare your hearts, for the time is coming when you will see the glory of God revealed in ways beyond comprehension, Jesus said, leading them onward into the night. For even as they journeyed, whispers of the impending kingdom surged in the air, a clarion call that beckoned them closer to the heart of the Father's sovereign design. What mysteries awaited them? What transformations lay ahead in his perfect plan? The dawn of revelation was nearer than they could perceive. As they journeyed through the narrow streets of the town, the disciples remained pensive, the weight of their teacher's words cloaking them in a solemn reverence. The flickering lamplights cast shadows upon their faces, illuminating their expressions of cautious hope and unease. The night air was thick with a palpable tension, like the stillness before a storm. "Master," said John, his voice barely a whisper, "if indeed you are the source of rest, how shall we instruct others who have long held to the law? Will they not protest against the freedom you proclaim?" Jesus stopped, turning to face them fully, the gentleness in his gaze cutting through the darkness. "It is the heart of the law I desire, not mere adherence to tradition. The very essence of my coming is to transform hearts, to fulfill that which was given through Moses. Remember what the prophet Isaiah foretold. For I will restore the fortunes of the people, and they shall rebuild the ruined cities. Amos 9:14. This restoration is for all, even for those entrenched in their ways. The disciples looked at one another, considering the magnitude of what their master implied, to rebuild and restore, yet not in the way their forebears had anticipated. Would they have to confront the leaders who clung to the shadows of the past? As they approached the outskirts of the town, a sudden commotion drew their attention. A man, blind from birth, sat at the gate, his matted hair framing a face marked by years of sorrow. His voice, although hoarse, rang with desperation. "Jesus of Nazareth, Son of David, have mercy on me." The crowd parted, the air charged with expectation. Some murmured, urging the man to quiet down, but his cries only intensified. Jesus approached the man, his expression one of deep compassion. "What do you seek?" Jesus asked, kneeling down before him, the world narrowing to this singular moment. "Rabbi, I want to see," the blind man cried, faith surging in his chest. Without hesitation, Jesus commanded, "Go, your faith has healed you." And immediately, the scales fell from the man's eyes. He blinked, dazzled by the brilliance of the moonlight, and his heart erupted into praises, for he now comprehended not only the physical light, but the very light of the world standing before him. "A miracle!" the onlookers gasped, awestruck by such an outpouring of divine power. They began to spread the news, and turmoil brewed amongst the Pharisees, who felt their authority wavering as each act of Jesus unveiled their hypocrisy. Peter, feeling the tension escalate, dared to raise a question. "Master, what do we say to those who will accuse you of breaching the Sabbath?" Jesus answered with wisdom and authority, "It is lawful to do good on the Sabbath, for it is written, 'I desire mercy and not sacrifice.' Hosea 6:6. In restoring life, I fulfill the very purpose of the Sabbath. It is a day for healing, for liberation. His words rippled through the gathering, igniting flames of conviction and stirring questions in the hearts of the onlookers. They could feel a shift beneath their feet, a stirring of something much greater than compliance with laws. It was the dawning of God's kingdom. As the night deepened, Jesus returned to his disciples, the fervor of the crowd still echoing in their hearts. His presence filled the void left by their uncertainty, and they sensed a new calling beckoning them to step forward into a new purpose. Prepare yourselves, he instructed with a steadiness that cut through the night's tumult. You are to be my witnesses, proclaiming what you have seen and heard. The dawn is coming, and it shall reveal the fullness of my Father's plan. The words settled upon them like a mantle. Each glance exchanged among the disciples reflected a shared understanding. They stood on the verge of a monumental shift in their lives, wrapped in the sacred mystery of God's unfolding narrative. Little did they know, the shadow of the cross loomed nearer, preparing to reveal the ultimate mystery of sacrifice and redemption that none could fully comprehend, yet awaited the world. What further truths lay hidden within the sacred scriptures, waiting to be uncovered by those who dared to follow? As the dawn began to break, painting the horizon in hues of crimson and gold, Jesus led his disciples to a secluded place, away from the thronging crowd. The atmosphere, once filled with the fervor of healing and miracles, now embraced a holy stillness, as if the very heavens held their breath. Gather close, Jesus beckoned, his voice steady yet tender, for there is more I must share with you. They formed a circle, the shadows of the night still clinging to their weary frames. Master, said Matthew, his brow furrowed with concern. Each act of healing stirs both faith and anger. The leaders question your authority, citing the law. How shall we stand firm amidst their opposition? Jesus looked upon them, sorrow and love mingling in his gaze. Close your ears to the echoes of doubt, for it is written, the just shall live by faith. Habakkuk 2:4. Understand this. My purpose is to dismantle the walls of tradition that blind the hearts of men. He paused, the weight of his words sinking deep into their souls. Do you not see? The Sabbath is a gift, a day set apart for rest and restoration, a promise of hope for the weary. I am the Lord of the Sabbath. In me, it finds its true meaning. A silence enveloped them as they mulled over his declaration. Each disciple wrestled with the revelation that pierced through their preconceived notions, challenging their understanding of what it meant to follow him. Tell us, Lord, Peter implored. How shall we convey this truth to those whose hearts are hardened? With a gentle smile, Jesus replied, Speak to them of love, for love is the fulfillment of the law. When you heal the brokenhearted, when you embrace the outcasts, you walk in my way. The true Sabbath brings liberation to the captives and sight to the blind. As his words echoed in the air, a part of their hearts ignited, aflame with the calling to share this liberating message. They began to glimpse the tapestry of God's unfolding plan, woven with threads of mercy and grace. In that sacred moment, Jesus lifted his hands toward the heavens and prayed aloud, his voice mingling with the soft rustle of the morning breeze. Father, reveal to them the depth of your love. Let them carry your light into the world, unafraid of the shadows that lurk in the hearts of men. As the last echoes of his prayer faded, a hush fell upon the space, and the skies broke open, revealing a radiant glory that momentarily enveloped them. It was as if the very heavens were affirming his words, inviting them into a greater understanding of their journey ahead. With renewed resolve, the disciples nodded, knowing though their path was fraught with trials, they were to shine the light of truth unyieldingly, just as their teacher had shown them. Suddenly, a rustle in the underbrush drew their attention, and out stepped a figure cloaked in humility, the very contours of his frame shadowed with desperation. Rabbi, he pleaded, my daughter is at the point of death. Come lay your hands on her so she may live. The urgency of his plea pierced the morning air, igniting within the hearts of the disciples an awareness of the approaching storm, a clash of faith, desperation, and conviction that would demand their very lives to be lived out boldly in this new covenant of grace. and as they followed Jesus toward the impending crisis, the air buzzed with the tension of what lay ahead. Could they grasp the fullness of his plan, or was there yet more to unfold in the sacred mystery of his calling? As they hurried through the narrow paths, the sound of the man's urgent footsteps echoed like a heartbeat against the backdrop of an awakening world. With every step, the air grew thicker, laden with faith and the weight of expectation. "Master," spoke John, his voice a blend of worry and determination, "what if the skeptics follow us? What if they attempt to discredit the miracle you are about to perform?" Jesus turned to face them, the sun reflecting off his countenance like a beacon. "Fear not, my beloved disciples, for I tell you this act shall be a testament of God's sovereign authority over life and death. It is by his divine grace that I come to heal." The journey quickened as the thoughts of the crowd began to echo in their minds. They remembered the stories of the prophets, of moments when faith had cracked the heavens open and released God's hand into the world. "Will he restore what was lost?" whispered Thaddeus, grasping at the threads of hope interwoven with doubt. As the house of the troubled father came into sight, the air thickened with anticipation. The windows were darkened, shrouded in mourning, and within walls that once echoed with laughter, now reigned a silence pregnant with despair. In the doorway stood Jairus, the ruler of the synagogue, his eyes filled with the haunting shadows of fear and desperation. "Rabbi, please," he implored, trembling as he fell at Jesus' feet. "My little daughter is dying. Come and lay your hands on her, that she may be healed and live." Jesus stepped forward, his compassion radiating like light piercing through darkness. "Fear not, only believe," he assured him, his voice gently wrapping around Jairus' heart like a warm embrace. As they entered the house, the wails of mourners echoed through the room. Flashes of sorrow darted around like flickering candles, the very atmosphere saturated with grief. The disciples hesitated, glancing back at Jesus, whose countenance remained steadfast. "Why this commotion and weeping?" Jesus questioned, his gaze piercing through the veil of despair. "The child is not dead but asleep." At this, the mourners laughed derisively, their voices mocking the very essence of hope that Jesus embodied. Yet, undeterred, he summoned the father and mother of the child, along with his closest disciples. He entered the room, a sacred space that now became charged with divine presence. Taking the child's hand, he spoke tenderly, "Talitha cumi," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." Instantly, she stirred, the lifelessness kissing her brow, slipping away as she opened her eyes, filled with the light of life anew. A rush of astonishment surged through the room, mingled with the breath of unexpected joy. The parents stood in shock, tears of disbelief cascading as their hearts burst with overwhelming gratitude. To those witnessing the miracle, the moment unfurled like a bloom in spring, revealing God's vibrant power over death, intertwining fear and reverence in the sacred air. "Give her something to eat," Jesus instructed with a gentle smile, for his compassion extended not merely to physical needs but to the restoration of life itself. The disciples stood in awe, realizing they were witnessing not merely a miracle, but a glimpse of the kingdom's fullness breaking into their midst. They began to understand, in that moment, the depths of grace and the layers of God's plan. The Sabbath was not just a day but a revelation of healing, hope, and redemption. As they departed from the house, the whispers of the miracle spread like wildfire among the onlookers. Yet Jesus charged them, "Tell no one of this resurrection," for the time had not yet come to fully reveal the depth of his identity. And as they made their way back through the streets, the air shimmered with possibilities and divine purpose. But deeper still, there lingered an unspoken question in the hearts of the disciples. If life could be restored to a child, what other mysteries awaited their understanding? What might God's plan further unveil as they continued to walk in faith? As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting deep hues of amber and violet across the sky, Jesus and his disciples walked in silence, hearts still reverberating with the astonishment of the day's miracle. The streets, once bustling with daily life, now lay awash in a tranquil glow, yet the echoes of awe-hushed voices clung to the air. The townsfolk, startled from their despair, began to murmur amongst themselves as the story of the little girl's resurrection began to weave its way through the community. "Rabbi," one of the disciples said, breaking the stillness. Even in her resurrection, the weight of our people's doubts lingers. The Pharisees will not rest until they find a way to challenge your authority. Jesus turned, his gaze steady. The truth is never diminished by the shadows of skepticism, he replied. Instead, it reveals the greater light that God desires to shine through our frailty. Remember, the kingdom is like a mustard seed. It may be small, but it grows into something great. As they continued to walk, they encountered a group of villagers. Among them was a woman whose very presence radiated despair. She had suffered for 12 long years, an affliction unyielding in its grip. Her eyes flickered over to Jesus, igniting a dashed hope within her heart. She had heard whispers of what had transpired within Jairus' home. "I have heard of your power to heal," she gasped, struggling through the throng, desperation coloring her voice. "If only I may touch the fringe of your garment, I will be made whole." Without hesitating, she pushed through the gathering crowd, and as she reached out, her fingers grazed the hem of Jesus' robe. In that moment, a surge of life poured into her from the depths of heaven, and Jesus stopped, feeling virtue leave him. "Who touched my garments?" he asked, looking about with piercing eyes. The disciples, taken aback by the query, answered, "You see the multitude thronging around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus persisted, scanning the faces surrounding him, until his gaze locked onto the woman trembling at his feet. With tenderness that burned like a consuming fire, he spoke, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace, and be healed of your affliction." The crowd gasped, their hearts swelling with marvel. The whispers of her healing began to spread, reclaiming the narrative of hope against the dreariness of doubt. "Rabbi," said one of the other disciples, noting the burgeoning assembly of people, "the news of your miracles spread swiftly. Can it be that you are unveiling the kingdom, a promise for all who believe?" "Yes," Jesus replied, his voice echoing with authority, "for now is the time of revelation. Each act of healing serves as a mirror to reflect the very nature of God's unwavering love. Do you not see? Through the Sabbath, he gifted the world a day to rest and reflect on his creation, a time to glimpse his glory. It is not merely a command, but an invitation into his rhythm of life." As they pressed onward, the weight of revelation settled heavily in the hearts of the disciples. Questions burgeoned, swimming in their minds, intertwining with the strands of divine purpose. "Master," muttered Peter, voice barely above a whisper, "if the Sabbath embodies your grace, then what deeper truths lie hidden within the shadows of our understanding?" With a solemn nod, Jesus replied, "They are few who perceive the depths of God's sovereign plan. The time approaches when all that has been hidden will be unveiled. For in the heart of this mystery resides the culmination of God's love, the ultimate rest that is to come. Prepare, for what lies ahead will shake the foundations of all belief." Thus, they journeyed on, hands clasped to strengthen the faith mingling with uncertainty, embracing the truth that God's redemptive chapters were still unfolding, and the greatest revelation was yet to be revealed. As the group continued their path, the sounds of the evening began to whisper through the air. Birds nestled in the branches, and the fragrance of blooming flowers sweetened the dusk. Yet a deeper tension crept among the disciples, an urgency born of the miracles they had witnessed. Suddenly, a man approached them, his brow creased with worry. He fell before Jesus, his voice tremulous. "My daughter is at the point of death," he implored urgently. "Come and lay your hands on her that she may be healed and live." The desperation in his eyes mirrored the anguish of a heart drowning in hopelessness. "Fear not," Jesus responded, compassion flooding his tone. "Only believe, and she will be made well." With a nod, he arose, setting out toward the man's home, the disciples trailing closely behind, their minds racing with the weight of this latest request. As they walked, the crowd pressed ever closer, eager to witness the unfolding miracle. The anticipation was palpable, and whispers of faith began to ripple through the throng. Yet amidst the throng, Jesus seemed acutely aware of every soul and every heartbeat. Suddenly, they halted in a bustling part of the town when a commotion arose behind them. A messenger burst forth breathless and distraught, his countenance dark as he approached the man who had sought Jesus. "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher any longer," he pronounced, and the words struck like a thunderclap, shattering the moment's hope. Immediately the anxiety of the disciples coiled tightly within them. Was this the end of faith? Would the miracles come to a halt before the crushing weight of death itself? They glanced at one another, questions swirling in their hearts. Jesus, undeterred by the anguished news, turned to the grieving father. "Do not fear. Only believe." His voice was an anchor against the rising tide of despair. In that moment, he demonstrated a peace that transcended understanding, a divine quietude that promised a deeper purpose in the darkness. As they arrived at the house, they were met with the sounds of mourning, for wailing filled the air, a haunting chorus of grief that resonated in every soul. Jesus entered, and with a calm authority, commanded those mourning to step aside. "The child is not dead but sleeping," he declared, and the reaction was swift, a cacophony of scorn and disbelief, for how could he speak such words against the certainty of death? But Jesus, wielding both compassion and authority, took the child's parents and his closest disciples into the room. There, he knelt by her side, his voice gentle, yet firm. "Talitha cumi," he commanded, which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." At his word, the breath of life surged back into her lungs, and she opened her eyes, as awakening from a deep slumber in the very presence of life itself. The astonished silence enveloped the room before ecstatic joy erupted, as cries of bewilderment met the miraculous reality before them. Jesus instructed her parents to give her something to eat, a normal act that bore witness to the extraordinary work of God unfolding within the ordinary fabric of life. As they left the house, overwhelmed by what they had witnessed, Jesus turned to his disciples. "What you have seen today speaks of the kingdom yet to come. It reveals my Father's promise of resurrection that binds death in the thread of life. Remember this, for doubt will seek to surface and faith will be tested." The disciples felt the earth shift beneath them as they considered the depths of this revelation. They were beginning to grasp a truth that would shape not only their journey, but also the future of all believers. Jesus continued, "The Sabbath is not merely a day but the embodiment of rest and restoration. In every miracle I reveal a taste of what is to come, the final consummation of all things. For even now the works of the Father are unfolding, and soon all that seems lost will be redeemed." In this moment, clarity dawned. The shadows of doubt began to lift. What lay ahead was not just a series of events, but a grand narrative of redemption, God's sovereign plan unfolding in divine mystery. The disciples felt the charge of destiny pulse in their hearts. And thus, as they embarked on the next leg of their journey, the certainty grew within them. What they had witnessed was but a precursor of the greater work to come. For the time was drawing near, and the miraculous tapestry of God's plan would soon reveal the full measure of His glory. As they continued forward, the depths of their recent encounter hung in the air like a weight of glory, yet accompanied by perplexity. The disciples walked silently, each absorbed in their own contemplation, the echoes of Jesus' words coursing through their minds. They had witnessed life restored, yet within them stirred an unsettling question. If death held no dominion, what did that mean for the world they knew? The twilight deepened, shadows lengthening around them as they journeyed towards the next town. Suddenly, a shout pierced the murmur of the evening. A blind man, seated by the roadside, lifted his voice in persistence. "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." His plea pierced the fabric of the night with trembling urgency. The multitude around him, filled with skepticism, attempted to hush the man, their voices rising in disapproval. "Be quiet, do not trouble him." But the beggar only cried out more fervently, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Hearing his cries, Jesus stopped, the weight of his own mission pulsing in his chest. "Call him," he instructed those nearby. The crowd parted as the man was brought forth, his heart thrumming with a desperate hope that coursed through his veins. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus inquired, his voice filled with divine tenderness. The blind man, trembling in anticipation, answered unhesitatingly, "Rabbi, let me recover my sight." "Go your way. "Your faith has made you well," Jesus replied. And in that instant, the man's eyes opened wide. Light flooded his vision, celestial and glorious, as colors burst forth, each hue vibrant and radiant. He beheld not only the world around him, but also the face of the one who had healed him. The man blinked in wonder and then broke into a joyous proclamation. "I can see. Praise be to God." His voice rang out, reverberating through the crowd, stirring souls from their apathy. Inspired by this miracle, many gathered around, their hearts ignited, asking him more about the kingdom and the love of God. "I tell you truly," Jesus spoke to the crowd, "the works I do are not merely for this moment but bear witness to the greater kingdom, the kingdom that has come near through me." He gestured toward the group, blessing them, calling them to faith and understanding of divine purpose. The stirring continued as whispers of awe and hope rippled through the gathered onlookers. What other wonders does this teacher possess? They began to wonder aloud. The atmosphere, thick with anticipation, thickened like the air before thunder, signaling that something greater was on the horizon. As dark gave way to the sparkling light of flames from nearby torches, Jesus turned to his disciples. "Has not the Father promised to reveal the hidden things? To those who seek him must come with the heart of a child, a heart that believes, that opens the door to mysteries far beyond understanding." His disciples were filled with a mingling of fear and awe. They began to suspect that these miracles were just the foretaste of eternity's banquet, the door ajar leading to deeper understanding. They were realizing their place in this divine narrative, yet questions lingered. What was it about the Sabbath, the rest that Christ had spoken of, that intertwined with all these mighty works? They pondered amongst themselves, seeking to understand the unfolding mystery, a mystery that hinted at a deeper revelation about rest, life, and return, a cosmic cycle that awaited completion. As they walked, illuminated by the flickering flames, he looked back at them. "The time is coming," he cautioned, "when the true understanding of the Sabbath will unfold, revealed through my sacrifice, the rest that remains for the people of God." A hushed whisper of anticipation settled over them as they began to realize that the sacred story was far from over. For with every word, the threads of God's sovereign plan weaved more intricately into the very fabric of their lives, leading them toward an unveiling greater than any miracle they had witnessed thus far. Under the expanse of a starlit sky, the atmosphere remained electric with the anticipation of what further wonders lay ahead. Jesus and his disciples continued their journey, embraced by the silence of the night, yet filled with a divine assurance that shimmered like the stars above. Their hearts were attuned to the unfolding melody of God's sovereign plan, and yet a deep sense of impending revelation stirred within them. As they traversed the hills, Jesus turned to face his beloved disciples, his eyes sparkling with compassion and knowledge. "There is a need for clarity in this hour, for soon you shall see the Father's heart fully revealed," he began, his voice resonating with authority and grace. "Prepare yourselves for the culmination of the mystery, the rest that is to come." The disciples leaned closer, eager for understanding. In the depths of their spirits, they felt the weight of unease mingling with hopeful anticipation. "Master," asked Andrew, his brow knitted with concern, "how shall we convey the truth of the Sabbath and its gift of rest to those who remain bound by tradition?" "Ah, my faithful companions," Jesus replied, the warmth of his presence enveloping them. "The Sabbath is not merely a day marked by rest. It embodies a profound truth that transcends time. It is a foreshadowing of the redemption that your hearts seek. True rest arises not from cessation of work alone, but through a relationship woven in faith and love." With each word, the darkness that hovered around them began to lift as a dawning light illuminated their understanding. The disciples blinked against the mingling shadows of doubt and gnawing questions that sought to tether their spirits. "Remember the prophets," Jesus continued, "how they spoke of a Redeemer who would bring forth restoration, healing, and peace. I come that you might have life and have it in abundance. For the ultimate Sabbath rest awaits those who look upon me with faith." The gentle power of his words washed over them, igniting a flickering hope that began to grow. Peter, emboldened by the atmosphere of revelation, declared, "We must prepare ourselves to share this truth with the world. May it be that our words lead others to discover the life-giving rest that only you offer." Jesus smiled, his heart swelling with pride for their burgeoning faith. "Indeed, I send you forth as bearers of this truth. Perform mighty works and proclaim the good news, for like the grains in the field, let souls be nourished by the truth of the kingdom that is approaching. You shall witness my coming glory, and the glow of my sacrifice will transform the very essence of what it means to rest in him." The promise echoed in the hearts of the disciples, resonating deeply with their newfound resolve. As they continued their journey, they were fortified in spirit, ready to witness the grand orchestration of God's plan. On the morrow, they would face naysayers and questioners, but armed with the knowledge of the kingdom's truth, they felt fearless against the clamoring shadows of doubt. For they were called to be conduits of grace, heralds of good tidings, and ambassadors of the rest which awaited through the Lord of the Sabbath. With dawn painting the horizon in shades of pink and gold, they approached a village, the sun rising as a symbol of hope, ushering in a new day filled with divine potential. "Remain steadfast, beloved friends," Jesus instructed as they neared the hearts of men and women longing for truth. "The hour of revelation is closer than you realize. Those who seek shall find, and those who knock shall have doors opened unto them." With renewed vigor, he led them onward, their hearts lit with purpose, understanding that their steps would leave echoes of what God's marvelous mercy can accomplish through the transforming power of rest, a Sabbath embodied in his sacrifice on the cross. And so, they forged ahead, a beacon of light against the backdrop of night, ready to shine forth the glory of God. For they knew deep within that they were part of a heavenly tapestry, a divine plan where rest would take root, binding their hearts in faith, hope, and love everlasting. As they stepped out into the bustling village, excitement surged within them. They were not just witnesses, they were about to ignite a fire of awakening in hearts hungry for the truth. Therefore, beloved, heed this call to action, striking as the bells of hope resound in your spirit. Subscribe immediately to stay connected to God's Word as you embark on this transformative journey filled with powerful biblical truths. Leave a like now to help spread God's Word through the algorithm, allowing the whispers of His love to reach hungry souls. Comment below your spiritual reflections and let us know how this biblical story has impacted your faith. Your testimony matters. And don't hesitate, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear God's truth. This is the moment to help spread biblical truth, transforming lives through the light of Christ. Only true believers understand the urgency of our mission. Join us in bringing hope to the world, for the rest is yet to come.